Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily News YouTube channel. Today's topics: Young and the Restless spoilers reveal in the calm before the storm in Genoa City. Sally is caught between two opposing orbits: her love for Billy and the ambition of a woman who has always struggled to be recognized. She hides a secret from Billy, not because she wants to betray him, but because she understands that any mistake at this time can drag them both down the cliff. That secret is called Abbott Communications, the unfinished legacy of Jack and Billy, where Sally is both a creative driving force and an invisible barrier that causes the relationships in the Abbott family to crack. When Jack is determined not to return the funding he used in the wrong way. When the council, the family, and names like Diane, Ashley, Tucker each have their own calculations, Sally chooses a bold path, contacting Jill herself, offering a way out with money. But money with conditions, money with healing. The video call between Sally and Jill took place in a seemingly business space. Stable connection, calm voice, numbers, and KPIs spread across the shared screen. But beneath those charts was a confession. Sally loved Jill's son. She admitted that they had a problem that could not be easily named. Not because of a lack of trust, but because there was an invisible third person standing between them: the past. Billy's past with reckless decisions. Jack's past with a family philosophy that did not want to compromise. Sally's own past when she tried to cling to every opportunity to avoid being drowned. And at the edge of the frame, the name Kane Ashb appeared as a red underline. Billy trusted Kane. For Sally, that was the spark that could burn all bridges between Abbott Communications and the Abbott family, because Jack would see it as an erosion of principles. And Jill, who had witnessed Kane's ups and downs, would not easily agree if she felt this was a naive compromise. Sally explained to Jill that she wasn't there to beg, but to trade. She wanted to bring Abbott Communications a new funding package. But with transparent controls, quarterly revenue, data sharing, a mechanism to eliminate conflicts of interest between Jack, Billy, the creative team, and the hiring of an independent monitor nominated by investors. Sally's argument was convincing in that she put long-term interests above immediate emotions. If Abbott Communications were to move beyond the shadow of family, tycoon, internal competition, it had to learn to live like a mature business, knowing how to admit mistakes, know how to pay debts, and know how to stand up from broken promises. Jill listened, took notes, and was skeptical in a Jillian way. Would Billy swallow the money she herself had dispersed? Would Jack accept being bound by a monitoring mechanism put in place by someone else? Sally didn't promise the impossible. She just promised a path to healing, where money wasn't the destination, but the tool to bring it all back to the table, remove emotion, and make the project live on its true value. At the same time, Diane was being forced to comply. The word must in Diane's world was never just an administrative order. It was a series of ties that intertwined family, fame, and old secrets. On the outside, Diane was the perfect Abbott wife. On the inside, she had to deal with pressure from the board, who wanted to see financial accountability put in place, and pressure from Jack, who hated having his motives questioned. When an internal memo leaked, revealing a line of misdirected spending related to Abbott Communications, Diane was thrust into the role of primary responsibility. She had to sign off on an independent review, agree to open the books, and agree to let a third party quantify the risk. For Diane, it was complying to save Jack, save her family, and save her hard-won honor. But complying came with a price. Things would no longer be closed-door affairs. In that financial power landscape, a dark undertone was quietly spreading. Rumors of a murder involving Sally. When Genoa City whispered, if Sally dies, the worst thing would not be losing a thorny character, but the domino effect that would immediately knock down all the walls of secrecy. Sally's death, if it were a murder, would be the key that accidentally opened the dirty archives of two other unsolved cases, Damien and Chance. Damien, the name that appeared in the art files, had long been rumored to be involved in a money laundering ring disguised as precious paintings and digital art NFTs. Chance, not just a cop, but a part of the town's history, touched the wrong things in his pursuit of that money. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Deleted text messages and encrypted hard drive. A few shipping receipts transferred in the middle of the night. And a string of mysterious media sponsorship deals that coincided in time with Abbott Communications' bold moves. All were cold blips on the case map. What did Sally know, and how much did she know to be a target? When she approached Jill for funding, in exchange for transparency, she agreed to shine a spotlight on the shadowy areas. Contrary to what many people think, Jill's money motive sometimes becomes the scissors that cut through the fog surrounding a project. Investors want data. The data needs to be clean. And to be clean, it must be audited. And when the audit comes, the transactions that borrowed from media funds, the content production contracts with prices double the market price, the advancements without invoices will be brought to the table. If there is a connection between those money flows and Damien, A money laundering ring through art exhibition sponsorship or some bait that once trapped chance. Then the one who sees Sally as dangerous is the one who is benefiting from the darkness. The worst case scenario if the incident happens. Sally is attacked right after leaving the meeting place with Jill. The news was shocking not only because of the pity, but also because of the timing. It made people think this was a random accident. But then the media smelled a string of coincidences. A video call with Jill, an email to schedule an audit, an unsent text message to Billy about an escape hatch for Abbott Communications. The public focused on the question, who benefits from Sally's permanent silence? Jack, Billy, Jill, Diane, each drawn into the storm in a different way. Jack faced a moral question. Did his stubbornness in not returning the donation inadvertently create the motivation or excuse for others to fan the flames of hatred? Billy was tormented by the fact that Sally had quietly done him a favor at the very moment he had entrusted his trust to Kane, who could indirectly further complicate his financial troubles. Jill, who was often considered strong because of Rice, bold because of money, suddenly became a witness to the moment before the storm and had to answer the question she hated. Did you force her? What did you gain if the company under your controlled the finances of Abbott Communications and Diane? Subscribe our channel for more latest update. In the worst case scenario, her compliance suddenly became a noose. The independent audit which she had signed was now a double-edged sword. It made transparent what needed to be transparent, but also exposed the business practices that should have been fixed quietly. Corresponding files between PR support payments and art events related to Damien were no longer in the internal system. Every connection, however loose, between the media campaign, exhibition sponsorship, and intermediary transfers was pinned on the board by the investigator. The new question arose. Was someone using the Abbott Communications cover to launder money? If so, Sally, who has just demanded transparency, is an impossible threat to the mastermind. However, there is another path, less dramatic and more clever. Sally stages a near-death experience. Not because she craves drama, but because she understands that only by making herself the bait can she draw the predator out of the bushes. In this scheme, Sally secretly cooperates with an independent investigator, not necessarily the police, to avoid leaks, using a fake itinerary and a few tracks to distract. When the attacker acts, the entire chain of communication, meeting points, and related IP addresses will be recorded. At the same time, the draft of the new sponsorship contract with monitoring provisions that she presents to Jill becomes a second bait. Whichever party reacts most strongly to the idea of an audit, that party is most likely to have something to lose. The results could unlock both the Damien case and the plot that led Chance to his demise. The big question, what will Billy do when he discovers Sally's secret? His choice will determine not only his emotional fate, but also the survival of Abbott Communications. If Billy reacts in the old way, angry, feeling cheated, he will lose again the woman who has just put herself in danger for him. If Billy is mature enough to see the common goal, saving the company, saving the family's honor, saving himself from the emotional quagmire, he will join Sally in the transparency plan. At that time, trust with Kane also needs a risk control mechanism. Any contract, cash flow, or consulting service that goes through Kane's channel must go through legal channels and independent audits. Billy can still trust his old friend, but he must learn to trust by system, not by feeling. As for Jill, her initial skepticism might be tempered by a serious enough proposal. Clear KPIs, a realistic profit path, and most importantly, an ethical commitment from both Jack and Billy. Jack, who hates having someone holding the reins, will only agree when he sees the larger goal, preserving the Abbott legacy, protecting Diane from baseless accusations through transparency, and turning Abbott Communications into a real brand, not a box of family associates. When Jack nods, Diane will stop complying with a coerced mind and instead become consensus with the person holding the operating valves. Finally, if the Sally case, whether real or fake, reveals key clues about Damien and Chance, Genoa City will have to get used to a new order, where the media is no longer a stage for power struggles, but a mirror for sneaky hands, where arts funding is no longer a convenient front, but is put under the microscope of profit, cash flow, responsibility, where the love between Sally and Billy can only survive if they agree to step through their own darkness. The story does not end with a kiss of atonement or a hug after the rain. It ends temporarily with the word system, a system of control, a system of transparency, a system of personal responsibility. And in that system, each character is forced to answer. Are you on the side of the light where all the numbers are verified, or continue to deny, hoping the darkness will cover you once more? Genoa City has been through too many storms, but the worst storms are always the storms that break out when people decide to tell the truth. Sally flipped that switch. The rest, it depends on the people who say they love her, love her enough to take responsibility with her, or love her in a way that wants her to stay silent so that everything is less complicated. Amid the turmoil of Abbott communications and the overlapping calculations surrounding Kane, the one thing Sally couldn't deny was the emotional weight that was weighing on Billy. She saw clearly how he tried to appear calm, but was still pulled by two opposing forces. Subscribe our channel for more latest update, his responsibility to Jack and his never-ending feelings and hurt for Jill. Sally understood that any financial plan or media strategy would be in vain if that mother-son relationship continued to crumble. So, even as she pursued a new path for Abbott Communications, Sally's focus was a simpler goal: how to get Billy through the storm zone without being defeated by the past. From Billy's perspective, the current conflicts are a replica of old cycles. He chooses to trust someone. This time, Kane, in the hope of opening up a pragmatic path. Jack resists because of principles and family brand. And Jill, even from a distance, acts as a persistent gravitational force, pulling him back to the unanswered questions of expectations, trust, and limits. Billy doesn't hate Jill. On the contrary, he still loves his mother in his own way, but that love always comes with the feeling of being weighed before being acknowledged. When Sally realizes this, she changes her approach. Not trying to untangle Abbott Communications with a single pressure, but separating the layers of problems. Work is work, family is family, so that no one has to pay for both at the same time. Meanwhile, Jack, as the honorary patron of the Abbott brand, was making a drastic move, urging Jill to look at Kane's schedule, cash flow, and business connections. Jack had known Jill long enough to know that any back and forth was weak against a data sheet scrutinized by investor standards. If the mystery was in Kane's schedule, only Jill's physical presence in Genoa City would have enough weight to get things back on track instead of hovering between video calls. Even Jack's proactively mentioning Kane by name to Jill was a message. He was not against Billy just because of the name Kane. He was against the way of doing business based on emotions where the line between helping each other and taking each other was too thin. Along with Jack's pressure and Sally's transparent proposal, a series of compelling reasons were formed to bring Jill back to Genoa City in the flesh. For Jill, management ability is not just about deciding whether to give money. It's also the art of reading people in real life. On-screen appearances are enough to keep the pace, but they're no substitute for face-to-face meetings where she can see how Billy reacts, how Sally presents, how Jack asks questions, and most importantly, how Kane explains, acknowledges, or dodges. So Jill's return on the week of September 29th to October 3rd isn't just a fan event. It's the turning point of the story where all the rumors are put on the table, all the emotions are called by their names, and all the deals, if any, are bound to come with clear terms. On another note, the unthinkable alliance between Jack and Victor has sent shock waves of power throughout Newman Media and the social circles surrounding Nikki and Diane. Nikki knows from experience what a dangerous deal is when two men who have often clashed suddenly find a common denominator large enough to temporarily put aside their animosity. The reason is Kane and more broadly the tangled web of interests that surround him. Nikki is right to believe that a temporary alliance between Jack and Victor will create the necessary chilling effect. Partners wary transfer slow and those accustomed to living off the loopholes are forced to reveal themselves. But any such alliance comes with a price, suspicion, friction, and ethical questions about the line between family interests and the public good. Diane was at the epicenter of that collision. As someone who was closely involved with Jack in both life and work, she knew why Jack needed Victor and why it made many people uncomfortable. Diane could be afraid because every agreement with Victor was like walking a tightrope in public. Just one detail misunderstood. The whole Abbott family was considered shaking hands with the enemy. However, the confrontation with Nikki forced Diane to choose. Either stay out and let the agreement be distorted by rumors, or accept, agree in an active way, that is monitor, set conditions, and be ready to take responsibility when necessary. Nikki, with the intuition of someone who had been around long enough, did not allow Diane to go in the middle. She forced Diane to look straight. If you want to protect Jack, put yourself in the control process instead of standing outside to judge. And if you are in the process, you have to accept the truth even if it is not pleasant. From the three axes, Jack, Victor, Nikki, Model, Sally, and Billy's interests suddenly became tied to a larger system. Sally's efforts to separate work and family finally had to be compatible with the rising tides outside. The positive. When transparency became the common slogan, Sally's plan was more likely to gain support, at least on a trial basis. The difficult thing was every error, however small, was magnified by a magnifying glass. Billy therefore had to not only deal with the hurt with Jill, but also relearn the skills of working in a living audit environment. Trust the system, not trust memory, delegate authority by terms, not delegate authority by feelings, and most Importantly, separate the emotional block with his mother from the decision block for the company so that no one could use that relationship as a bargaining chip. When Jill arrived at GC, the pace of inquiries immediately accelerated. She was in no hurry to rescue Abbott Communications with money. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Instead, she asked for a quarterly risk map, a list of contracts. That involved Kane, and a staffing plan that showed Sally retaining creative control without slipping into judgment. Here's the key. Jill is astute with talented but impulsive young people. She saw in Sally the bold energy to lead the brand, but also understood that one misplaced professional emotion could burn bridges with Jack. By designing a two-key mechanism, one for the CEO to operate, one for the investment board, Jill both forced Sally to share the risk and ease Jack's worries about the company becoming a personal theater. The other problem was Kane. If his schedule and connections were simply vague partner-friend arrangements, Jill would ask to terminate to avoid a conflict of interest. But if there are more dirty lines involved, for example, transfers through shell companies or consulting services without invoices, then the story takes an investigative turn where the Jack-Victor alliance comes into play. Nikki and Diane, even as they stare at each other, are forced to look at the numbers. Diane's forced acceptance is no longer a personal concession, but a defense of the system, opening the door just in time to avoid a dam bursting. In this multi-layered picture, the greatest value Sally can bring to Billy is not rescuing Abbott Communications, but giving him back the ability to choose. To choose to forgive Jill in a mature way, to choose to break with the emotional trust model, to choose to set new limits for himself within a more equitable structure. Once Billy takes the initiative to enter the healing process, the rest will change. Jill becomes less defensive, Jack becomes less harsh, and Sally becomes less of a fixer-upper. Once the mother-child relationship is diffused, all other levers, money, alliances, media can play their proper role instead of becoming explosive reagents. The most likely and most plausible scenario is a temporary pivot of stability. Jill agrees to stay at GC long enough to oversee the transition. Abbott Communications gets a structural plan. Kane's schedule is scrutinized and risk points are locked. And the Jack-Victor alliance formalizes a fire fence to prevent the leakage of benefits. Nikki continues to be cautious, but she will admit that this is her best chance to stem the flow of murky waters. Diane, after overcoming her conflict with Nikki, is in her rightful place, process guarantor, not change blocker. And Sally, who ignited the transparency process, can finally breathe as a true innovator, not a lone warrior. Subscribe our channel for more latest update.